Detective Sergeant Richard Keller smiled as he watched the terrified young black woman being led into the courtroom in handcuffs. 6 months of meticulous work had led to this moment, framing Zara Washington for drug possession. The district attorney nodded confidently at him. Then it happened. As Judge Holloway asked for her plea, Zara slowly raised her chin. "Not guilty, Your Honor. My name is Special Agent Imani Reynolds, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The color drained from Keller's face as she added, "And I have the evidence that will put this officer away for life." What dark secrets was this corrupt officer hiding? And how far would he go to silence the woman who uncovered them all? Before we dive into this shocking story of injustice and courage, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe in standing up for justice no matter the cost, hit that like button and subscribe, because tomorrow's special episode reveals how an entire corrupt system can be brought down by one brave soul willing to risk everything. 3 months earlier, Imani Reynolds sat nervously in FBI Assistant Director Clark's office, fidgeting with her freshly issued credentials. At 24, she was one of the youngest agents to be selected for an undercover operation of this magnitude. Clark slid a thick folder across his desk, the name Westbrook Police Department emblazoned across the top. "The statistics are disturbing, Agent Reynolds," Clark said, his voice grave. "Westbrook PD has arrested black citizens at a rate of 78%, despite them making up only 12% of the population. We've had complaints, civil rights violations, allegations of evidence tampering, but nothing sticks. 2. Previous agents attempted investigations. Both were mysteriously reassigned." Imani opened the folder, her eyes widening at the faces of dozens of black citizens arrested on dubious charges. "Why me, sir? You graduated top of your class in undercover operations. You can pass for 19, and frankly, we need someone who understands what these people are experiencing." Clark didn't need to mention that Imani had grown up in a neighborhood not unlike Westbrook. "Your cover is Zara Washington, college student taking a semester off. Your mission is to gather concrete evidence of discriminatory policing patterns and potential criminal misconduct." 2 weeks later, Imani moved into a small apartment in the predominantly black neighborhood of Pine Hills in Westbrook. She'd spent days memorizing her cover story, practicing the mannerisms of a 19-year-old, and familiarizing herself with the area. Her apartment was sparsely furnished, but equipped with hidden compartments for her real identification and recording equipment. Her first encounter with Officer Richard Keller came sooner than expected. Walking home from the grocery store, a patrol car slowed beside her. The window rolled down, revealing a middle-aged white officer with cold blue eyes. "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" Keller asked, his tone deceptively friendly. "Just going." "Home, officer," Imani replied, keeping her voice steady despite the immediate tension. "ID, please." No explanation, no justification, just a demand. Imani handed over her fake ID. Keller examined it with exaggerated scrutiny. "New to Westbrook, Zara? What brings you to our town?" "Taking a break from college. Staying with my aunt." Keller stepped out of his vehicle. "Put those groceries down and place your hands against the wall, please." "Excuse me, why?" "Just a routine check. This is a high drug trafficking area." Imani complied, feeling a mixture of authentic fear and researcher's curiosity as Keller conducted an unnecessarily thorough pat-down. She noticed his partner, a younger officer named Dawson, watching with obvious discomfort but remaining silent. "You seem nervous, Zara," Keller said, his breath hot against her neck. "Guilty people get nervous." "I'm not guilty of anything," Imani replied, her heart racing despite her training. Keller eventually let her go with a warning to stay out of trouble, but the message was clear. He was watching her. As the patrol car pulled away, Imani felt a chill that her FBI credentials couldn't dispel. The fear was real, and it struck her how terrifying these encounters must be for people without the protection of a badge. That night, she reported to her handler, Agent Marcus Chen, via an encrypted line. "He targeted me immediately," Imani explained. "No probable cause, no reasonable suspicion. Just saw a young black woman walking alone and decided to assert his authority." "Be careful, Reynolds," Chen warned. The two agents before you vanished without getting solid evidence. Official story is they were reassigned, but no one's heard from them since. Westbrook has powerful connections. Over the following weeks, Imani methodically built her cover and connections within the community. She volunteered at the local community center, frequented neighborhood businesses, and slowly gained people's trust. The stories she heard were consistent. Keller and several other officers regularly harassed black residents, conducted illegal searches, and made arrests on flimsy pretexts. Most disturbing was learning that despite numerous complaints, Keller had received multiple commendations from Police Chief Ronald Mercer. The local newspaper regularly featured stories praising Keller's tough-on-crime approach that had supposedly cleaned up Westbrook's streets. What the articles failed to mention was that this success came at the expense of the civil rights of black citizens. Imani knew she needed to tread carefully. Keller wasn't just a rogue officer. He appeared to be protected by the department's highest levels. She was up against not just one racist cop, but potentially an entire system designed to shield him. As she laid in bed that night planning her next move, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The real challenge had just begun. 2 months into her undercover assignment, Imani had become a familiar face at the Pine Hills Community Center, where she volunteered 3 times a week. The center's director, Jamal Williams, was a former social worker who had dedicated his life to providing safe spaces for neighborhood youth. These kids need somewhere to go that isn't crawling with cops looking to fill their quota, Jamal told her one afternoon as they organized donations for an after-school program. Officer Keller especially. Man has a talent for turning teenage mistakes into felony records. Imani nodded sympathetically, using the opening to dig deeper. I had a run-in with him my first week here. Does he always target newcomers? Jamal's expression darkened. Keller has a system. New faces, people who look vulnerable, anyone he thinks won't have the resources to fight back. Last month, he arrested Marcus Johnson's boy for suspicious behavior. Kid was just waiting for the bus. Over coffee after their shift, Jamal introduced Imani to several community members who had experienced Keller's racial profiling firsthand. Each story followed a similar pattern. Unnecessary stops, insulting questions, searches without consent, and for some, arrests based on evidence that mysteriously appeared during these encounters. Imani began carefully documenting everything. Her apartment became a fortress of evidence, hidden cameras disguised as everyday objects, voice recorders in modified jewelry, and meticulous notes encrypted and transmitted to Agent Chen daily. Her investigation revealed something even more troubling. Most of Keller's arrests ended up before Judge William Peterson, who dismissed virtually all complaints against the officer and imposed harsh sentences on those Keller brought in. The relationship seemed suspiciously cooperative. One evening, while walking home from the community center, Imani witnessed something that made her blood run cold. Keller had stopped a teenager named Tyler outside the corner store. From her position across the street, Imani activated her hidden camera, just in time to record Keller subtly dropping a small bag into the boy's open backpack while pretending to search it, then discovering the planted drugs with theatrical shock. "Look what we have here," Keller announced loudly for witnesses. Another drug dealer off the streets. The boy's protests fell on deaf ears as he was handcuffed and placed in the patrol car. Imani's hands trembled with rage as she continued recording. Every instinct screamed at her to intervene, to flash her FBI credentials and end this injustice. But revealing herself now would destroy months of work and any chance of bringing down the entire corrupt system. Instead, she followed up the next day, learning the boy's name was Tyler Johnson. His mother, Diana, was devastated, insisting her son had never been involved with drugs. Imani carefully befriended Diana, offering support while gathering another first-hand account of Keller's pattern of abuse. Tyler got a scholarship to study engineering, Diana sobbed during one conversation. Now he's facing felony charges, his future is ruined. The weight of her silence grew heavier with each new victim, but Imani channeled her guilt into more aggressive evidence gathering. She began deliberately placing herself in Keller's patrol areas, documenting each interaction. The officer seemed to take special interest in her now, stopping her frequently with flimsy justifications. "You're around an awful lot of troubled individuals, Zara," Keller remarked during one stop. "Makes me wonder what you're really doing." In Westbrook. More alarming was Keller's network of informants. He seemed to know Imani's movements, appearing near locations she had only mentioned in private conversations. The revelation that she was being watched electrified her investigative instincts, but also sent fear coursing through her veins. During one particularly tense encounter, Imani noticed Officer Dawson, Keller's partner, looking increasingly uncomfortable with his colleague's behavior. The younger officer avoided eye contact when Keller made racist comments and minimally participated in the harassment. Imani flagged him as a potential weak link in Keller's armor. Her biggest breakthrough came when she discovered that complaints against Keller weren't just being ignored, they were being actively suppressed by Judge Peterson, who routinely threw out cases against the officer citing insufficient evidence or procedural errors. Even more disturbing were whispers that Police Chief Ronald Mercer was fully aware of Keller's methods, but protected him because his high arrest numbers made the department look effective to city officials. Are you shocked by how deep this corruption goes? Comment number 1 if you believe police systems need more independent oversight, or number 2 if you think these are just isolated incidents. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that expose the truth behind the badge. As Imani digs deeper into this corrupt system, will she be able to maintain her cover, or is she about to become Keller's next target? Stay tuned as the danger escalates in the next part of this gripping story. Imani sensed the shift in Keller's attitude toward her immediately. His stops became more frequent, his questions more pointed. No longer was she just another black resident to harass. She had become a specific target of his attention. "Interesting background you have, Zara," Keller commented during one particularly intimidating stop. "Called your previous address in Atlanta. Nobody seems to remember you there." Imani's pulse quickened, but her undercover training kept her expression neutral. "I kept to myself," she replied casually. "Only lived there for a semester before." "Dropping out?" Keller's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." The threat hung in the air long after he drove away. That evening, Imani returned from grocery shopping to find her apartment door unlocked. She hadn't left it that way. Drawing the small personal weapon she kept concealed in her purse, she cautiously entered, scanning for intruders. Finding no one, she immediately checked her secret compartment behind the bathroom vent, where she kept her real FBI credentials and primary communication device. They remained undisturbed, but as she moved through the apartment, she noticed subtle changes. A drawer not fully closed, books slightly rearranged, her laptop at a different angle than she had left it. Someone had searched her apartment, and they had been professional enough to make the intrusion almost undetectable. Imani couldn't report the break-in without drawing unwanted attention, but she immediately upgraded her security measures, installing motion-triggered cameras and relocating her most sensitive equipment. Her next call to Agent Chen was tense. "He's investigating me, Chen, checking my background, searching my apartment." "This is getting too dangerous," Chen replied, concern evident in his voice. "Maybe we should pull you out." "Not yet," Imani insisted. "I'm close to something big." Keller isn't working alone. The following day, Jamal pulled her aside at the community center, his voice low. "Be careful, Zara. Keller's been asking questions about you around the neighborhood. Wanted to know how you support yourself, who you talk to, where you go." Before she could process this warning, news spread through the community that Marcus Taylor, who had witnessed and filed a complaint about Keller planting evidence, had been severely beaten by unknown assailants. The message was clear to everyone. Speaking out against Keller had consequences. Despite the increasing danger, Imani pushed forward. Her surveillance revealed a pattern she hadn't anticipated. Keller made regular visits to an abandoned car wash on the outskirts of town. Setting up observation from a safe distance, she documented Keller meeting with a local drug dealer known as Marcus King. The exchange was brief but unmistakable. Keller handed over small packages, presumably drugs confiscated during arrests, and King handed back cash. The revelation was staggering. Keller wasn't just targeting black residents out of racial animus. He was running a profitable racket, confiscating drugs only to resell them through King. Images and video of these exchanges went immediately to Agent Chen. "This is bigger than we thought," Chen said when they next spoke. "Illegal searches, planted evidence, now drug trafficking. Keller's looking at serious federal time. But I'm worried about your safety, Reynolds. If he suspects you're not who you say you are." "I need more time," Imani argued. "These meetings with King are damning, but I need evidence connecting Keller to the judge and possibly the police chief. Otherwise, they'll sacrifice Keller, and the system continues." As if to confirm her growing danger, Imani received a traffic ticket the next day from an officer she'd never met, for an infraction she hadn't committed. The message was clear. The department was watching her. Her instincts about Officer Dawson proved correct. She noticed the young officer watching her from his patrol car one evening, and when she approached, he didn't drive away. Instead, he rolled down his window, looking nervously over his shoulder before speaking. "Whatever you're doing in Westbrook," Dawson said quietly, "be careful. Keller doesn't play by any rules, and he's got friends in high places." It wasn't much, but it confirmed Imani's suspicion that Dawson might be turned if approached correctly. A potential ally within the department could be invaluable, especially as Keller's net tightened around her. After carefully vetting Officer Dawson through background checks run by Agent Chen, Imani made her move. Using a series of innocuous encounters, she established a rapport with the young officer, eventually engineering a meeting at a coffee shop outside Westbrook where they wouldn't be observed. "I know you're uncomfortable with what Keller does," Imani said once they were seated in a back corner, her voice low. "I've seen your face when he harasses people with no cause." Dawson stared into his coffee, shoulders hunched. "It's not what I signed up for. I wanted to protect people, not terrorize them." "Then help me," Imani pressed. "What's really happening in the department?" After some hesitation, Dawson opened up. "Keller has targeted over 200 black residents in the past year alone. The department knows. Hell, they encourage it because his arrest numbers make everyone look good. Chief Mercer gets to boast about crime reduction at city council meetings, and Judge Peterson gets to look tough on crime by handing out maximum sentences." Dawson confirmed Imani's suspicions about the extent of the corruption and provided names of other potential witnesses within the department. The conversation ended with Dawson agreeing to discreetly share internal information, though he refused to wear a wire, fearing retaliation. Imani didn't know that this meeting had been observed by one of King's associates, who promptly reported to Keller. The officer's response was immediate and vicious. The next day, while Imani was documenting another of Keller's illegal stops of a black teenager, the officer spotted her watching from a distance. He abandoned his current target and marched directly toward her. "You just can't mind your own business, can you?" he growled, backing her against a wall. With no witnesses nearby, Keller dropped all pretense of professionalism. "You people never learn. This is my town, and I decide who gets to live peacefully here." Imani's hidden recorder captured every word, as Keller unleashed a torrent of explicitly racist statements, threatening her with arrest if she didn't stay in line. The recording was damning, but it also confirmed that Keller had definitely marked her as a problem to be eliminated. The escalation continued rapidly. Additional patrol cars began appearing near Imani's apartment at all hours. She noticed unmarked vehicles following her to and from the community center. Then Marcus King himself approached her while she was shopping, sliding up beside her in the produce section. "Heard you've been asking questions about Officer Keller," King said, examining an apple with exaggerated interest. "People who do that tend to find themselves in trouble, deep trouble, sometimes the kind you don't come back from." Imani recorded the encounter and sent it to Chen immediately, connecting King's threats directly to Keller's influence. The pieces were coming together, but time was running out. Through careful observation and Dawson's limited information, Imani documented multiple meetings between Keller and Judge Peterson outside official channels. She obtained audio of them discussing how to handle problem defendants and which cases could be manipulated to maximize civil asset forfeitures that benefited the department. The danger hit even closer to home when Diana Johnson, Tyler's mother, called Imani in tears. "I've been fired from my job," she sobbed. "My manager said they received an anonymous call claiming I was stealing from the company." Imani's investigation revealed that the call had come from a burner phone purchased by Keller. It was retaliation for Diana filing a formal complaint about her son's arrest, and it demonstrated how far Keller would go to punish those who challenged him. The most dangerous moment came when Imani managed to photograph Keller tampering with evidence in the police station evidence room. She had gained access through a maintenance worker's badge that Dawson had helped her duplicate. The photographs showed Keller removing drugs from evidence bags, replacing them with harmless substances, and updating logs to cover his tracks. She barely escaped detection when another officer unexpectedly entered the room, forcing her to hide in a storage closet for nearly an hour. With this evidence, Agent Chen and the FBI team began preparing to move in. But Chen insisted they needed one final definitive piece of evidence, something that would connect all the players and prevent any of them from claiming ignorance or shifting blame. "We need to get them all in one operation," Chen insisted during their secure call. "Otherwise, Keller becomes the fall guy. Peterson claims he was misled and Mercer pretends he had no knowledge. The system continues under new management." What Imani didn't know was that Officer Dawson, terrified by Keller's growing suspicion and the potential consequences of being labeled a traitor, was about to make a decision that would put her life in immediate danger. Have you ever witnessed or experienced racial profiling by police? Comment number 1 if you believe body cameras should be mandatory for all officers, or number 2 if you think they wouldn't make a difference. Like and subscribe if you want justice systems that protect everyone equally. As Imani stands on the precipice of either exposing widespread corruption or becoming its next victim, what critical mistake will put everything she's worked for in jeopardy? The trap is about to spring in our next installment of this thrilling story. Officer James Dawson sat alone in his patrol car, hands trembling as he stared at his phone. The text from Keller was explicit. "My office, now. We need to talk about your new friend." Dawson's mind raced through his options, each one worse than the last. If Keller knew about his meeting with Zara, his career was over. But if Keller discovered Zara was gathering evidence against him, her life could be in danger. Dawson had joined the Westbrook Police Department with idealistic notions of serving his community. His disillusionment had been gradual, first overlooking Keller's aggressive tactics, then witnessing clear misconduct, finally becoming complicit in systematic discrimination. Each compromise had seemed small until he found himself drowning in a sea of ethical violations. With a deep breath, Dawson made his choice. Self-preservation won. 30 minutes later, he sat across from Keller in the station's back office, confessing everything. "She's been asking questions about your arrests, the department's practices. Seemed especially interested in your relationship with Judge Peterson." Keller's face remained unnervingly calm. "And you thought it was appropriate to discuss department business with this person?" "I thought she was just a concerned citizen," Dawson lied, his mouth dry. "I didn't tell her anything specific." Keller leaned back, studying the younger officer. "I've been watching Ms. Washington for weeks. Something's off about her. No real job, no verifiable background, suddenly appears in Westbrook and takes an unusual interest in police activities." He opened a drawer and removed a file. "I've had King's people watching her. She's not who she claims to be." As Keller outlined his suspicions about Zara's true identity, Dawson felt a chill run down his spine. Keller wasn't just planning to intimidate or frame her anymore. He was building a comprehensive case to destroy her completely. "Here's what happens next," Keller explained, his tone conversational as if discussing lunch plans. "You're going to help me set up our friend Zara. Consider it your penance for stepping out of line." Across town, Imani was unaware of Dawson's betrayal as she documented her latest findings for Agent Chen. The connections between Keller, Judge Peterson, and Police Chief Mercer were becoming clearer. She had evidence of the judge dismissing complaints against Keller despite compelling evidence, the chief protecting Keller despite knowledge of his misconduct, and Keller using his position to run a drug operation that benefited all three men through civil asset forfeitures and kickbacks. "We're almost ready to move," Chen told her during their encrypted call. "The assistant director has approved a joint operation with the Civil Rights Division. We just need concrete evidence linking all three to know their level of involvement." "I'm close," Imani assured him. "Dawson's information about internal meetings has been valuable. With a little more time." A sharp knock at her door cut the conversation short. Through her peephole, Imani saw Marcus King standing in the hallway, looking impatient. She quickly ended the call and slipped her FBI communications device into its hiding place. "What do you want?" she demanded through the closed door. "Just a friendly conversation," King replied, his tone suggesting anything but friendliness. "About our mutual acquaintance, Officer Keller." Against her better judgment, but seeing an opportunity, Imani opened the door slightly, keeping the security chain engaged. King's usual swagger was gone, replaced with nervous energy. "Keller's out of control," King said, glancing over his shoulder. "He's squeezing everyone, getting greedy. Word is he thinks you're some kind of informant." Before Imani could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Trap. Don't trust King." The warning came too late. As she reached for the door to close it, King pushed hard, breaking the security chain. Behind him, two large men moved into view. Imani tried to reach for her emergency alert button, but King's associates were on her. In seconds, as they pinned her to the floor, King casually began planting bags of heroin throughout her apartment. "Nothing personal," King said with a shrug. "Just business. Keller says you're a problem that needs solving." After they left, Imani frantically tried to contact Chen, but her communications were mysteriously blocked. She attempted to collect the planted drugs, but before she could finish, her door burst open. Keller stood there, warrant in hand, flanked by 4 officers, including a visibly uncomfortable Dawson. "Zara Washington," Keller announced formally, a smirk playing at his lips. "We have a warrant to search your residence based on reliable information that you're dealing narcotics. The raid was executed with excessive force. Officers ransacked her apartment, while Imani was handcuffed and forced to sit on the floor. She maintained her cover as Zara despite the rough treatment, knowing that revealing her FBI identity now would be dangerous without backup. "Well, well," Keller announced triumphantly, holding up one of the bags King had planted. "Looks like we've got ourselves a dealer. Maybe now we'll find out what you're really doing in Westbrook." As they led her out in handcuffs, news cameras were already waiting. Keller had tipped off the local media. Neighbors watched in shock as Imani was paraded toward the police cruiser. Among the onlookers, she spotted Jamal and Diana, their expressions betraying confusion and hurt at her apparent deception. At the station, Imani was processed like any other suspect. Her requests to make a phone call were repeatedly denied. She knew that somewhere in the FBI, Chen would be triggering emergency protocols for a missing agent, but how long would it take them to find her? And would they reach her before Keller could implement whatever he had planned next? In his office, Keller met with Police Chief Mercer and Judge Peterson, updating them on the situation. "You're sure about this?" Chief Mercer asked, looking nervous. "If she really is just a nosy college student, this level of targeting could raise questions." "She's something more," Keller insisted. "And now we control the narrative. By the time anyone starts asking questions, she'll be just another drug dealer serving time, her credibility destroyed." Judge Peterson nodded in agreement. "I'll make sure her case moves quickly. No bail, expedited trial. By next week, this problem disappears." What none of them realized was that Imani had managed to activate her emergency backup recording device during the arrest. Every word of their conspiracy was being captured and transmitted to a secure FBI server. Despite the jamming of her primary communications, the trap had been sprung, but not necessarily on the person they had intended. The cell door clanged shut behind Imani, with a cold finality that echoed through the holding area of Westbrook County Jail. The small concrete room held 3 other women, all of whom regarded the newcomer with wary eyes. Imani had been processed, like any other inmate, photographed, fingerprinted, stripped of personal belongings, and issued a faded orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. Phone call, Imani had requested for the fourth time during processing. The booking officer, a heavy-set woman who wore her authority like armor, barely looked up. Systems down. Maybe tomorrow. It was a blatant lie, but Imani had no recourse. Keller had clearly instructed the jail staff to isolate her completely. She had been in custody for nearly 18 hours without contact with the outside world, which violated standard protocols. More concerning was that the FBI would have already noted her missed check-ins and would be looking for her, but would they know where to look if her arrest had been kept off official channels? In the cell, Imani sat on the edge of a thin mattress, assessing her situation. The other women continued watching her until one finally broke the silence. "What they get you for?" The speaker was a tall woman with intricate braids and tired eyes that suggested she'd seen the inside of this jail before. "Drug possession," Imani replied, maintaining her cover. "Officer Keller." The name acted like a key, unlocking sudden recognition. Among the women, the tall woman moved to sit beside her. "I'm Valencia," she said quietly. "Been in and out of here 3 times this year. Always Keller. Always evidence that wasn't mine." Over the next hour, Imani learned that all 3 women had similar stories targeted by Keller, arrested on flimsy or fabricated evidence, unable to make bail, waiting for court dates that kept getting postponed. The pattern Imani had been investigating was reflected perfectly in this small cell. Valencia leaned closer. "Keller has a thing for women who won't play his game. You turn him down?" "I never gave him the chance," Imani replied. "Smart. Those who do still end up here, but with more trauma to show for it." This was new information. Sexual coercion wasn't part of the allegations Imani had documented. She carefully encouraged Valencia to share more, building a mental file of new evidence. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the cell block door opening. Officer Keller himself strolled in, flanked by a jail guard who quickly made herself scarce. "Ms. Washington," Keller said, his voice dripping with false concern. "How are we enjoying our accommodations?" Imani remained silent, watching him carefully. Keller dismissed the other women who were escorted to another area by the guard. Once alone with Imani, his demeanor changed. "You've caused me considerable inconvenience," he said coldly. "Made me look into your background more thoroughly than I might have otherwise." He paced slowly before her. "Funny thing about Zara Washington. She doesn't seem to exist before 6 months ago. No real credit history, no school records I can verify, no employment history. Almost like she was created out of thin air." Imani felt her pulse quicken, but kept her expression neutral, drawing on her FBI training for maintaining cover under extreme stress. She remembered her instructor's words. "Your cover identity is like a second skin. Even when they tear at it, you don't reveal what's underneath." "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied evenly. Keller leaned in, his face inches from hers. "I think you do. I think you're working for someone. A rival dealer, an advocacy group, or something else entirely." When Imani remained silent, Keller straightened up. "Doesn't matter. People who cross me have accidents, Ms. Washington. Tragic ones. Some inmates never make it to their court dates." After he left, Valencia and the others returned, giving Imani concerned looks. "When Keller personally visits, it's never good," Valencia whispered. "What did he want?" "To threaten me," Imani replied honestly. Valencia nodded knowingly. "Listen, my cousin's getting released tomorrow. Need to get word to anyone outside?" Imani seized the opportunity, providing a coded message that any FBI agent would recognize, along with Chen's name and the FBI field office location. It was a risk, but a calculated one. If Valencia was setting her up, it wouldn't matter. If she was genuine, it might be Imani's only lifeline. Later that day, Imani learned from a sympathetic guard that her bail had been set at $500,000, an astronomical amount for a first-time drug offense. Judge Peterson's influence was evident. Even more troubling, she discovered her court-appointed attorney was Douglas Fairchild, known among inmates as Peterson's puppet, who routinely pressured defendants into plea deals regardless of evidence. Most alarming was learning that the evidence from her apartment had been processed under unusual protocol, logged directly by Keller, rather than the evidence technician, with no chain of custody documentation. They were systematically erasing any possibility of a fair process. As Imani lay on her thin mattress that night, she recalled her FBI training scenarios. None had prepared her for this level of coordinated corruption. She was isolated, her cover, at risk, with no guarantee that her backup protocols had been successful. Yet beneath her anxiety ran a current of determination. Every abuse she witnessed was further evidence against Keller and his network. If she could maintain her cover and survive long enough for the FBI to find her, this case would expose not just one corrupt officer, but an entire system of injustice. Have you ever felt abandoned by the systems meant to protect you? Comment number 1 if you believe prison reform should be a national priority, or number 2 if you think the current system works as intended. Like and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment under the law, regardless of race or background. As Imani fights to maintain her cover in the heart of a corrupt system, is help on the way, or will Officer Keller's influence extend beyond Westbrook to silence her permanently? The conspiracy grows deeper in our next installment. Agent Marcus Chen hadn't slept in 36 hours. The moment Imani missed her second consecutive check-in, he had initiated the emergency protocols for a compromised agent. Now, surrounded by monitors and concerned colleagues at the FBI field office, he stared at the last piece of data they had received, a partial transmission from Imani's backup recording device, capturing a conversation between Keller, Chief Mercer, and someone identified as Judge Peterson. "We've got confirmation she's in Westbrook County Jail," reported Special Agent Diaz, hanging up her phone. "But she's been processed under unusual protocols. No booking photo in the system, no phone call allowed, and her name isn't on the visitor log." "They're isolating her completely," Chen concluded, his concern deepening. "And the local FBI office is getting stonewalled by the department. Chief Mercer is claiming they're having system issues and can't provide details about recent arrests. This goes higher than Keller," said Assistant Director Clark, who had flown in when an undercover agent went missing. "We need to move carefully. If they realize she's FBI, she's in immediate danger." Chen pulled up the files Imani had been sending over the past 3 months. "I've been cross-referencing her reports with our database. 2 previous agents were assigned to investigate Westbrook PD for civil rights violations. Both were officially transferred to different assignments, but neither reported to their new posts." "You think they were murdered?" Clark asked, his expression grim. "I think we need to find out," Chen replied, already typing commands to access sealed personnel files. What they discovered was chilling. Agent Wilson and Agent Tanner had both been investigating Westbrook PD. Both had reported concerns about Officer Keller and possible department-wide corruption. Both had suddenly gone silent. The official record showed transfers requested by the agents themselves, but Chen found inconsistencies in the paperwork signatures that didn't quite match. Request forms with formatting differences from standard FBI documents. Someone with enough influence to alter FBI personnel records wanted these investigations shut down, Chen concluded. "We need to move now, but we need to be smart. If Keller and his allies realize we're coming, Imani could disappear," just like Wilson and Tanner. While the FBI scrambled to mount a rescue operation, Chen made contact with Jamal Williams at the community center, working through secure channels to establish trust. "I don't know who you are," Jamal said during their encrypted video call, "but if you're trying to help Zara, you should know her arrest was a setup. The whole neighborhood saw it." "We believe you," Chen assured him, "and I need your help to keep her safe until we can intervene." Across town, in the office of Police Chief Ronald Mercer, a very different meeting was taking place. Keller sat across from the chief, while Judge Peterson paced nervously, and District Attorney Michael Harrington sipped a glass of bourbon despite the early hour. "The FBI has been sniffing around," Chief Mercer announced, dropping a folder on his desk. "Asked for our arrest records from the past month, specifically requesting information about Zara Washington. I told you something was off about her," Keller insisted. "Question is, who is she working for?" "Does it matter?" Judge Peterson interjected. "Whatever evidence she may have gathered, it disappears when she does." The casual reference to murder silenced the room momentarily. until DA Harrington spoke. Let's not be hasty. If she is working with federal authorities, her disappearance would trigger an investigation we couldn't control. But a discredited witness, a drug dealer whose testimony is worthless, that we can manage. Their conversation revealed the true extent of Westbrook's corruption. What had begun years ago as Keller's targeted harassment of black residents had evolved into a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Arrests led to civil asset forfeitures, with cash and property seized from drug dealers flowing into department coffers. Judge Peterson ensured cases moved quickly with high bail amounts that few could pay, leading to plea deals regardless of guilt. The district attorney provided legal cover, while Chief Mercer maintained the political relationships necessary to keep the operation running smoothly. The Washington girl is scheduled for initial appearance tomorrow, Judge Peterson noted. I'll deny bail based on flight risk, fast-track her case, and make sure she's transferred to state prison within the week. Once she's in the general population there, our problems solve themselves. And if the FBI keeps asking questions, Chief Mercer asked. I'll handle it, DA Harrington assured them. I'll say we've been building our own case against corrupt officers. Make it look like we're the ones who uncovered the problem. As they strategized, none of them realized that Imani's emergency transmission had captured enough of their previous conversation to interest federal prosecutors. Nor did they know that Chen had located former Agent Wilson, who hadn't been killed, but had been forced out of the FBI after reporting the Westbrook corruption to superiors who were later discovered to have political connections to Westbrook's mayor. They buried my reports, Wilson told Chen during their meeting at a safe house, then transferred me to a field office that didn't exist. When I questioned it, I was told I had mental health issues and encouraged to resign. But I kept copies of everything. Wilson provided a flash drive containing evidence he had gathered before being removed records of suspicious asset forfeitures, patterns of targeting black residents, and financial irregularities in the department's accounts. Meanwhile, Imani was using her limited resources to build alliances inside the jail. Through Officer Rivera, a new guard troubled by the treatment of inmates, she managed to get a message to Jamal, who had been arrested during a protest about her detention outside the police station. Whatever happens in court tomorrow, the message read, make sure there are witnesses, many witnesses. Officer Rivera also helped Imani contact Diana and other community members who had been victimized by Keller, encouraging them to attend her court appearance. Though she couldn't reveal her true identity, Imani was laying the groundwork for a very public exposure of Westbrook's corrupt system. That night, Officer Dawson, consumed by guilt over his betrayal, made a decision that would change everything. He contacted Agent Chen through the number Imani had given him weeks earlier, offering internal police documentation in exchange for consideration during prosecution. I made a terrible mistake, Dawson admitted, but I want to make it right. I have files from Keller's computer records of every person he's targeted, bank accounts where he's hiding money, and communications with Judge Peterson about which cases to expedite. As these various threads converged, Assistant Director Clark reviewed all the evidence and made a crucial decision. He contacted the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division and the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, arranging for federal agents to be present at Imani's court appearance the following day. We go in quiet, Clark instructed the team. Observe only until we have confirmation of Reynolds' safety. If Keller or any of his associates attempt to move her from the courthouse, we intervene immediately. While the FBI prepared their operation, Keller celebrated at a local bar with Chief Mercer, confident that their problem would soon be permanently resolved. By this time tomorrow, Keller boasted, raising his glass, Zara Washington will be on her way to becoming another statistic, and we'll be back to business as usual. What he didn't know was that business as usual in Westbrook was about to change forever. Dawn broke over Westbrook County Jail as Imani was roused from her cell. Two officers she didn't recognize secured her with handcuffs and leg shackles, excessive restraints for a first-time non-violent offender. Transport to courthouse for initial appearance, one officer stated flatly, avoiding eye contact. Imani noticed immediately that this wasn't standard procedure. Inmates usually went to court in groups, not individually, and the transport van waiting outside was unmarked, lacking the usual sheriff's department insignia. As she was guided into the van, she recognized the two officers inside. Both were known associates of Keller, officers who had participated in his discriminatory policing practices. Neither was normally assigned to prisoner transport. "Comfortable, Ms. Washington?" asked Officer Reynolds, a burly man with cold eyes. His partner, Officer Griggs, smirked as he checked her restraints, tightening them unnecessarily. The van pulled away from the jail, but Imani's FBI training kicked in as she mentally tracked their route. 3 turns later, she was certain they weren't heading toward the courthouse. "Court is the other direction," she observed calmly. "Roadwork," Reynolds replied without turning around. "Taking the scenic route." 15 minutes later, the van turned onto a service road leading into Westbrook Industrial Park, an area largely abandoned after factory closures a decade earlier. The van stopped beside a dilapidated warehouse, out of sight from the main road. "Bathroom." "Break?" Imani asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Reynolds finally turned to face her. "Not exactly. See, there's been a change of plans. You're going to try to escape. We'll be forced to stop you. Tragic, but these things happen." Imani's mind raced through her FBI hostage survival training. Rule 1, buy time. Rule 2, humanize yourself to your captors. Rule 3, look for opportunities, however small. "Your careers are over if you do this," she said conversationally. "Keller isn't worth it." "Shut up," Griggs snapped, drawing his weapon. "Get out. Now." As Imani was pulled from the van, she deliberately stumbled, using the movement to assess her surroundings. The warehouse appeared empty, no witnesses. Both officers were armed. Her shackles limited mobility. "You know, I interviewed at Westbrook PD before taking a semester off," she said, continuing to humanize herself. "Wanted to be an officer since I was a kid." Reynolds hesitated momentarily, exactly what Imani had hoped for. That brief connection gave her an opening. "My brother's a cop in Atlanta," she continued, referencing a detail in her cover story. "He always says the job is about protection, not power." "Enough talking," Reynolds ordered, but his tone had lost some of its edge. Griggs pushed her toward the warehouse entrance. "Inside, now." Imani took a small step, then abruptly dropped her weight and swung her shackled arms upward, catching Griggs under the chin. The move, practiced countless times in FBI tactical training, stunned him momentarily. Before Reynolds could react, she had rolled behind a concrete barrier. "This isn't going to end how you think," she called out, keeping her voice steady. "There are people who know where I am," Reynolds laughed. "Nice try. Nobody knows about this little detour." What Reynolds didn't know was that Officer Rivera had witnessed the unusual transport arrangement and immediately contacted Agent Chen. Nor did he know that Imani's backup tracking device, disguised as a medical alert bracelet they hadn't removed, during processing was actively transmitting her location. The standoff continued for several tense minutes. Imani, still handcuffed, used the limited cover available, while Reynolds and Griggs circled the area, looking for a clean shot. Griggs, nursing a bloodied lip from Imani's strike, called Keller. "We've got complications," he reported. "She's fighting back." Keller's response was immediate and cold. "Finish it. I don't care how. This ends today." Griggs' face hardened as he ended the call. "You heard the man. No more games." As he rounded the concrete barrier, weapon raised, the warehouse door burst open. Agent Chen led a team of FBI agents into the building, weapons drawn. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." Reynolds and Griggs froze, then slowly put their guns down, the reality of their situation sinking in. Chen rushed to Imani's side. "Agent Reynolds, are you injured?" The use of her real name and title was deliberate, a clear message to Keller's officers that their drug dealer was actually a federal agent. Their expression shifted from confusion to horror as they realized the magnitude of what they had almost done. "I'm fine," Imani assured Chen as another agent removed her restraints. "But Keller knows something is wrong. He'll be destroying evidence as we speak." Chen nodded grimly. "Teams are already moving on the police station, courthouse, and DA's office. But we need you to maintain your cover until we secure all the players. If Keller realizes we've identified everyone involved, the whole network might scatter." The plan was quickly established. Imani would continue as Zara Washington, appearing for her court hearing as scheduled. FBI agents would be positioned throughout the courthouse, ready to move when Imani gave the signal. By maintaining the charade, they hoped to catch not just Keller, but Judge Peterson, D.A. Harrington, and Chief Mercer all at once. As Imani was properly transported to the courthouse this time, in an FBI vehicle disguised as a standard prisoner transport, Keller was indeed scrambling to cover his tracks. Surveillance footage captured him shredding documents in his office, while computer forensics would later show mass deletions of files. Judge Peterson was backdating warrants to legitimize previous illegal searches, and D.A. Harrington was preparing statements claiming he had been building a case against corrupt officers all along. The courthouse was unusually crowded when Imani arrived. Thanks to Jamal and Diana's organizing, dozens of community members had come to witness the proceedings. News cameras waited outside, alerted by anonymous tips about irregularities in her arrest. Among the spectators, FBI agents in plain clothes stationed themselves strategically, while Assistant Director Clark coordinated the operation from a command center established in a nearby federal building. As Imani was led into the courtroom, in handcuffs, she spotted Keller sitting confidently beside the prosecutor's table. Judge Peterson presided with his usual stern demeanor, while Chief Mercer and D.A. Harrington observed from the gallery. The trap was set, but who exactly was being trapped remained to be seen. What would you do if you witnessed corruption in a system you were part of? Comment number 1 if you would risk your career to expose it, or number 2 if self-preservation would win out. Like and subscribe if you believe whistleblowers deserve stronger protections. As Imani prepares to reveal her true identity in a courthouse filled with corrupt officials who want her silenced, will the FBI's plan succeed? Or will Westbrook's powerful conspiracy find a way to maintain their grip on power? The explosive confrontation awaits in our next thrilling installment. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Peterson called the case of the state versus Zara Washington. Imani stood before the bench, still in handcuffs, the picture of a frightened young woman facing serious charges. D.A. Harrington stepped forward, exuding confidence. Your Honor, the defendant is charged with possession of heroin with intent to distribute, a Class B felony. Given the substantial quantity discovered in her residence and her lack of community ties, the state requests remand without bail. Judge Peterson nodded solemnly. Ms. Washington, do you understand the charges against you? Before Imani could respond, the courtroom doors opened and a man in a tailored suit slipped in, taking a seat in the back row. Agent Chen had arrived, positioning himself strategically for the coming confrontation. What Imani didn't know was that during her transport to the courthouse, Keller had made a devastating discovery. A partial background check had finally come through, revealing inconsistencies in Zara Washington's identity. Rather than exposing her immediately, Keller had developed a more calculating strategy, one that would neutralize Imani regardless of her true identity. Your Honor, Keller interrupted, approaching the bench with a folder. May I present new evidence relevant to this case? Judge Peterson, breaking normal protocol, nodded. Proceed, Detective. Keller handed documents to the court clerk. We've discovered that the defendant may be operating under a false identity. Furthermore, our investigation has uncovered evidence suggesting she may be a compromised federal agent. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Imani maintained her composed expression, though her pulse quickened. This was an unexpected twist. Specifically, Keller continued, we have reason to believe Ms. Washington is actually an FBI agent who has gone rogue, using her position to protect drug trafficking operations in Westbrook. The audacity of the accusation momentarily stunned even Agent Chen. Keller was attempting to flip the entire narrative, transforming Imani from an investigator into the criminal. Keller presented fabricated bank records showing deposits to Zara Washington that coincided with major drug busts in Westbrook. He produced doctored photographs showing Imani meeting with known drug dealers, including Marcus King meetings that had actually been part of her evidence gathering, but were now framed as criminal conspiracies. We believe this individual infiltrated Westbrook to protect certain drug operations while targeting others for her own benefit, Keller explained smoothly. When we began investigating her activities, She attempted to discredit our department by fabricating evidence of misconduct. From his seat in the gallery, Police Chief Mercer nodded gravely, playing his role perfectly. The performance was convincing, so convincing that several community members who had come to support Zara began whispering among themselves, doubt creeping into their expressions. D.A. Harrington stepped forward again. In light of these developments, Your Honor, the state is amending the charges to include impersonation of a federal officer, corruption, and interference with a police investigation. We request immediate transfer to federal custody for further investigation of these serious allegations. Imani recognized the strategy immediately. If she were transferred to federal custody under these allegations, she would be isolated from her FBI support team, potentially handed over to federal marshals, who might be connected to this conspiracy. Keller was trying to cut her off from all potential allies. Judge Peterson appeared appropriately concerned. These are disturbing allegations, Mr. Harrington. Does the defendant have representation? On cue, a public defender Imani had never met stood up. Douglas Fairchild, Your Honor, appointed to represent Ms. Washington. Fairchild, known as Peterson's puppet, approached Imani as if to consult with his client. In a whisper meant only for her, he delivered a chilling message. Cooperate with the transfer, or things get much worse. Keller has friends everywhere, even in federal lockup. Imani had a split second to decide her next move. Maintaining her cover would lead her further into danger. Revealing her identity would trigger the FBI operation, but potentially allow some conspirators to escape in the chaos. As Fairchild waited for her response, Agent Chen made the decision for her, rising from his seat and moving toward the front of the courtroom. Keller noticed the movement and recognized Chen from surveillance photos of Imani's known contacts. His expression hardened as he realized his carefully constructed trap might be falling apart. Your Honor, Chen called out, his FBI credentials already in hand. I need to address the court on this matter. Before Peterson could respond, Keller moved with surprising speed, positioning himself between Chen and the bench. This man is part of the conspiracy, he announced loudly. He's here to help his corrupt colleague escape justice. The courtroom erupted in confusion. Court officers moved toward Chen while others surrounded Imani. In the chaos, Keller signaled to officers Reynolds and Griggs, who had been allowed back on duty pending an internal investigation of the morning's events. They approached Imani, clearly intending to remove her from the courtroom. Jamal stood up from the gallery. That's not what happened. Keller's been targeting people in our community for years. Order, Judge Peterson shouted, banging his gavel. Remove that man from my courtroom. As court officers moved toward Jamal, more community members stood, voicing support. Diana Johnson stepped into the aisle. My son was framed by Officer Keller. We all know what's happening here. The courtroom was splitting into factions, community members who had witnessed Keller's abuses versus court officers following Peterson's orders. In the growing disorder, Reynolds and Griggs grabbed Imani's arms, attempting to escort her through a side door. It was now or never. Imani planted her feet firmly and spoke in a clear, authoritative voice that cut through the chaos. My name is Special Agent Imani Reynolds, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I am conducting an authorized undercover investigation into civil rights violations and corruption within the Westbrook criminal justice system. The room fell suddenly silent, all eyes turning to her. Even Keller seemed temporarily frozen by the directness of her declaration. Officer Keller, she continued, looking directly at him, you are under federal investigation for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and conspiracy against rights. The documents you just presented to this court are fabricated and constitute additional federal offenses. Keller's face darkened with rage. She's lying. We have proof she's working with drug dealers. But the spell had been broken. Agent Chen used the distraction to signal FBI agents positioned throughout the courtroom, who now moved in to secure the exits and approach key targets. Chief Mercer stood abruptly. This proceeding is over. As Chief of Police, I'm ordering the defendant returned to county lockup, pending verification of these claims. It was a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation, but too late. Assistant Director Clark had entered the courtroom with additional agents, effectively ending any chance of Keller or his associates managing the situation. "Chief Ronald Mercer," Clark announced, "you are also under federal investigation. I suggest you sit down and remain silent." As federal agents moved to secure the courtroom, Keller made one final desperate attempt to salvage his crumbling scheme. "She has no evidence," he insisted to anyone who would listen. "It's her word against ours. We're the police. We're the justice system here." But from the gallery, Officer Dawson finally found his courage. "She has evidence," he stated clearly, "and so do I." Keller's face registered the ultimate betrayal as his once loyal partner joined the growing chorus of voices ready to testify against him. The counterattack had failed spectacularly, transforming what was supposed to be Imani's public discrediting into the first act of Westbrook's day of reckoning. The federal takeover of the Westbrook courthouse had immediate ripple effects throughout the city. FBI agents secured the police station, courthouse offices, and district attorney's headquarters, seizing computers and files before they could be destroyed. Judge Peterson and DA Harrington were detained for questioning, while Police Chief Mercer was placed under formal arrest after attempting to flee the building. Officer Keller, still in the courtroom, watched his carefully constructed world collapse around him. His expression shifted from rage to disbelief as he realized the extent of what was happening. When agents approached to detain him, he went without resistance, too shocked to fight back. With the immediate situation contained, Imani now officially, Agent Reynolds again was quickly debriefed in a secure room within the courthouse. Her handcuffs had been removed, and she rubbed her wrists as she spoke with Assistant Director Clark and Agent Chen. 3 months undercover, Clark said, shaking his head admiringly. "You've gathered enough evidence to bring down the entire Westbrook justice system." "Not just me," Imani corrected. "This was possible because people in the community were brave enough to speak out despite the risks." Outside the secure room, those very community members waited anxiously. Jamal, Diana, Valencia, who had been brought from the jail, and dozens of others who had witnessed or experienced Keller's abuses firsthand. Imani requested permission to address them directly. "These people trusted Zara Washington," she explained to Clark. "They deserve to hear the truth from me." Clark hesitated but eventually agreed. "Keep it brief. We still have a major operation underway." When Imani stepped out to meet the gathered community members, their reactions were mixed. Some looked betrayed, others confused, a few understanding. She took a deep breath before speaking. "My name is Special Agent Imani Reynolds. I came to Westbrook because the FBI received numerous reports of civil rights violations by the police department and court system. I couldn't tell anyone my real identity because it would have endangered both the investigation and all of you." She paused, making eye contact with Jamal and Diana. "I witnessed the same injustices you've been experiencing for years. The difference is I had a badge and an agency behind me. You've been fighting this battle alone, and I am deeply sorry for any additional pain my deception may have caused." Valencia stepped forward. "So what happens now? Keller gets arrested, serves a few months, and comes back to do the same thing under a different badge?" It was a fair question, one that cut to the heart of systemic problems. Imani glanced at Clark, who nodded his approval for her to continue. "This investigation doesn't end with Keller's arrest," Imani explained. "We've documented patterns of abuse throughout the department and court system. Every case Keller touched will be reviewed. Every asset forfeiture will be investigated. And, most importantly, your testimonies, your experiences will be central to building these cases." Agent Chen joined them, adding, "We've located former Agent Wilson, who attempted to investigate Westbrook 2 years ago before being forced out of the bureau. His evidence, combined with what Agent Reynolds has gathered and your testimonies, gives us an unprecedented case." Jamal looked skeptical. "We've heard promises before. What makes this different?" "Because I'm not leaving," Imani replied firmly. "I'll be stationed in Westbrook throughout this process, ensuring that every voice is heard and every case is properly investigated." This commitment seemed to resonate with the group. Diana, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "My son, Tyler, is still in prison on fabricated charges. Can you help him? Tyler's case will be prioritized for review, Chen assured her, along with all others involving evidence handled directly by Keller. As the meeting continued, Officer Dawson was brought in, visibly nervous about facing the community he had helped to police under Keller's corrupt leadership. "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted to the room. "I knew what was happening was wrong, but I convinced myself I was just following orders. When Agent Reynolds approached me, I had a chance to do the right thing, and I failed. Then I betrayed her to save myself." His honesty was met with understandable anger from many community members, but Imani intervened. Officer Dawson ultimately provided crucial evidence and has agreed to testify against Keller and the others. His cooperation will help ensure justice is served. The impromptu meeting evolved into something unexpected, the foundation of an alliance between federal authorities and the Westbrook community. People began sharing information, connecting dots that even Imani's investigation hadn't uncovered. Names of other officers involved in misconduct emerged. Patterns of discrimination extending beyond policing into housing, employment, and education were identified. Meanwhile, former Agent Wilson arrived at the courthouse, bringing with him the evidence he had salvaged before being pushed out of the bureau. "I never thought I'd see this day," he admitted to Imani. "They buried my reports, threatened my pension, labeled me unstable. I thought Westbrook was untouchable." His documentation provided historical context for Imani's findings, showing that the corruption had existed for at least a decade, gradually becoming more sophisticated and entrenched. As the day progressed, FBI teams reported recovering significant evidence despite Keller's attempts to destroy records. Computer forensics experts were able to retrieve deleted files showing the full extent of the conspiracy. Hundreds of falsified reports, manipulated evidence logs, and communications between Keller, Peterson, and Mercer coordinating their actions against targeted individuals. Perhaps most damning was the discovery of records documenting over $3 million in civil asset forfeitures from predominantly black residents over the past 5 years, with much of that money unaccounted for in official department budgets. Imani's FBI superior, Assistant Director Clark, reviewed the mounting evidence in real time, coordinating with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division to determine the appropriate scope of federal intervention. "This goes beyond a few corrupt individuals," Clark observed grimly. "We're looking at a systemic failure requiring a complete restructuring of Westbrook's criminal justice infrastructure." By evening, federal agents had secured cooperation from several lower-level officials within the courthouse and police department, each eager to provide information in exchange for leniency. Officer Rivera from the jail supplied detailed accounts of mistreatment of detainees. Court clerks admitted to manipulating case assignments to ensure Keller's arrests went before Judge Peterson. Even the mayor's office was implicated in maintaining the status quo, despite numerous complaints. As night fell over Westbrook, Imani stood at the window of the makeshift FBI command center, watching federal agents continue to work methodically through the evidence. The community members had returned to their homes, many for the first time feeling that justice might actually be possible. Agent Chen joined her at the window. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be intense." Imani shook her head. "Keller spent years building this network. We have one chance to dismantle it completely. I'll rest when it's done." She turned back to the evidence board, where photographs of Keller, Judge Peterson, Chief Mercer, and DA Harrington were connected by red lines representing their conspiracy. Below them, dozens of victim statements waited to be entered into official record, stories that had been ignored for too long. "Tomorrow," Imani said with quiet determination, "we make sure the truth is heard." The federal courthouse in downtown Westbrook, rarely used for high-profile cases, buzzed with unprecedented activity. Media vans lined the street, reporters jostling for position as federal marshals established a secure perimeter. Inside, the gallery was filled to capacity: community members, journalists, legal observers, and a row of FBI agents in plain clothes monitoring the proceedings. Imani sat at the prosecution table beside Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Vasquez, who had been dispatched from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division to lead the case. Across the aisle, Officer Keller, now in a prison jumpsuit, sat with his court-appointed attorney, his confident demeanor replaced by sullen resignation. Judge William Peterson and Police Chief Ronald Mercer occupied the defense table immediately. Behind Keller's, their attorneys whispering urgently as they reviewed the federal indictments. Dear Michael Harrington had been granted a separate hearing, having agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. The bailiff called the court to order as Federal Judge Eleanor Simmons entered, her reputation for fairness and meticulous adherence to procedure making her the ideal jurist for such a controversial case. These proceedings will determine whether sufficient evidence exists to move forward with federal charges against the defendants, Judge Simmons explained to the packed courtroom. Assistant U.S. Attorney Vasquez, you may begin. Vasquez rose. Confidently, Your Honor, the United States will demonstrate that the defendants engaged in a coordinated conspiracy to violate the civil rights of Westbrook citizens through discriminatory policing, evidence tampering, judicial misconduct, and obstruction of justice, she gestured toward Imani. The cornerstone of our case is evidence gathered during a 3-month undercover operation by FBI Special Agent Imani Reynolds, who documented numerous instances of misconduct by Officer Keller with the knowledge and participation of both Judge Peterson and Chief Mercer. Keller's attorney immediately objected. Your Honor, any evidence gathered by Agent Reynolds is fruit of an unauthorized investigation. My client was never read his rights during their interactions. Judge Simmons considered this briefly. Mr. Reeves, this is not a criminal trial, but a preliminary hearing to determine if charges should proceed. Your objection is noted but overruled for current purposes. Vasquez called Imani to the stand. As she was sworn in, Imani made eye contact with Jamal, Diana, and other community members in the gallery, drawing strength from their presence. Agent Reynolds, Vasquez began, please describe for the court how your investigation was initiated and what you observed concerning Officer Keller's policing practices. Imani detailed the statistical anomalies that had first drawn FBI attention, the disproportionate arrest rates of black citizens, and her subsequent observations of Keller's targeting patterns. She presented recordings of Keller making explicitly racist statements, conducting searches without probable cause, and planting evidence during arrests. On March 3rd, I witnessed Officer Keller place a bag of what later tested positive for heroin into the backpack of Tyler Johnson, a 19-year-old student with no prior record, before discovering it during a search that was itself conducted without consent or probable cause. The courtroom remained silent as video evidence of this incident played on monitors throughout the room. In the gallery, Diana Johnson wept quietly as she watched the definitive proof of her son's innocence. During cross-examination, Keller's attorney attempted to portray Imani as an outsider who didn't understand the realities of policing in Westbrook. Isn't it true that Pine Hills has higher crime rates than other neighborhoods? Wasn't Officer Keller simply focusing resources where they were most needed? The data doesn't support that claim, Imani replied calmly. FBI analysis shows crime rates in Pine Hills were comparable to predominantly white neighborhoods, yet received 3 times the police presence and resulted in arrest rates 10 times higher. The defense attorney shifted tactics. You developed relationships with community members during your investigation. Isn't it possible your objectivity was compromised, that you became emotionally invested in finding wrongdoing? I documented. Objective evidence, Imani countered. Video recordings, audio files, financial records, none of these are influenced by emotional investment. As the questioning continued, Officer Dawson was called to testify. Visibly nervous but determined, he described the departmental culture Keller had created. New officers were trained to view certain neighborhoods, always black neighborhoods, as problem areas requiring aggressive policing, Dawson explained. Keller would say, statistics don't lie. More crime means more criminals. But we were manufacturing those statistics by targeting specific communities. When asked about Judge Peterson's role, Dawson was explicit. It was common knowledge in the department that if you had a weak case against someone from Pine Hills, you made sure it went to Judge Peterson. He would overlook procedural issues, deny suppression motions, and impose maximum sentences. During his testimony about the attempted elimination of Imani, Dawson broke down. "I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid of losing my job, my pension, my life even." Keller made it clear what happened to people who crossed him. As the hearing progressed into its second day, Officer Rivera testified about jail conditions and differential treatment of detainees based on race. Court clerks confirmed the manipulation of case assignments. Financial experts detailed the civil asset forfeiture scheme that had enriched the department while devastating black families. When forensic accountants presented evidence of unexplained deposits in accounts connected to Keller, Peterson, and Mercer, the defense attorneys looked increasingly concerned. The money trail was damning, showing clear patterns of funds moving from seized assets into private accounts through a series of sophisticated transfers. By the afternoon session, more community members were called to testify. Jamal described the impact of Keller's tactics on neighborhood youth. Valencia detailed the sexual harassment female detainees experienced when they refused Keller's propositions for leniency. One by one, residents who had been victimized by the corrupt system finally had their experiences validated in an official forum. The most dramatic moment came when Tyler Johnson, recently released from prison through emergency federal intervention, took the stand. His quiet dignity as he recounted his arrest and the destruction of his academic future brought many in the courtroom to tears. "I had a full scholarship," Tyler said. "I was going to be an engineer. After Officer Keller planted those drugs, I lost everything. My school, my reputation, my freedom. Even now that I'm out, the damage to my record remains." As community testimony continued, Judge Peterson's attorney requested a brief recess, clearly recognizing the overwhelming nature of the evidence being presented. During the break, he approached Vasquez with an offer. Peterson would provide testimony against Keller and Mercer in exchange for consideration during sentencing. The dominoes were falling. Chief Mercer's attorney made a similar approach minutes later. Keller, sensing his former allies abandoning him, became agitated, demanding to address the court when proceedings resumed. Judge Simmons allowed it, advising Keller of his right to remain silent. Ignoring his attorney's frantic objections, Keller stood. "This is a witch hunt," he began, his voice strained. "I was doing my job keeping Westbrook safe from criminals. Every department in America uses the same tactics. I'm just the one who got caught." His attempted justification quickly devolved into anger. "You think crime won't skyrocket when I'm gone? When officers are afraid to do their jobs? The system works. These people," he gestured contemptuously toward the community members in the gallery, "they don't respect authority, don't follow rules. Someone has to keep them in line." As Keller continued his racist tirade, Imani noticed Judge Simmons' expression, hardening. The officer's own words were accomplishing what even the strongest evidence might struggle to achieve, revealing the deep-seated prejudice that had driven his actions for years. In a final, damning moment, Keller inadvertently referenced the reassignment of previous FBI agents who had investigated Westbrook. "You think Reynolds is the first Fed who tried to interfere. The others were smart enough to back off when warned. They understood how things work." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Simmons leaned forward. "Are you referring to Agent Wilson and Agent Tanner, Mr. Keller? Are you admitting knowledge of interference with prior federal investigations?" Keller suddenly realized his mistake, glancing at his attorney in panic. "I'm not admitting anything. I'm just saying this isn't the first time outsiders have tried to tell us how to police our city, but the damage was done." Vasquez immediately requested that Keller's statement be entered into the record and that additional charges of interference with a federal investigation be considered. As the day's proceedings concluded, Judge Simmons looked out over the courtroom, her expression grave. "Based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient cause to move forward with all charges against all defendants. The pattern of civil rights violations, corruption, and obstruction of justice demonstrated here is among the most egregious this court has witnessed," she continued, addressing the gallery directly. "To the citizens of Westbrook who have suffered under this system, this court acknowledges your pain and commends your courage in coming forward. The road to justice is long, but today represents a significant first step." As court adjourned, Imani was surrounded by FBI colleagues congratulating her on the successful operation. but her attention was fixed on the community members, embracing each other in the gallery people who had been fighting this battle long before she arrived and would continue long after the headlines faded. They were the true heroes of Westbrook, and their victory was just beginning. 6 months after the dramatic federal hearing, Westbrook was a city in transition. The old courthouse, once a symbol of corrupted justice, now housed a community oversight board established to monitor police activities and review citizen complaints. The board's 7 members, elected from diverse neighborhoods throughout Westbrook, included familiar faces. Jamal Williams served as chairperson, while Diana Johnson headed the case review committee. The police department operated under federal supervision, with officers wearing body cameras and following revised protocols for stops, searches, and arrests. The statistics told a compelling story. Overall arrest rates had decreased by 40%, while successful prosecutions of legitimate crimes had increased, demonstrating that targeted harassment had never been effective law enforcement. Aunt M.E. This particular morning, Imani Reynolds stood before a different courthouse, the federal building in downtown Atlanta. The sentencing phase of United States v. Keller et al. Had concluded after months of testimony, evidence review, and legal arguments. Richard Keller had received 30 years in federal prison after being convicted on 97 counts, including civil rights violations, evidence tampering, drug trafficking, obstruction of justice, and attempted murder of a federal agent. The man who had terrorized Westbrook's black community for a decade would spend the remainder of his career-eligible years behind bars. Judge William Peterson had accepted a plea agreement, providing extensive testimony against Keller and Chief Mercer in exchange for a reduced sentence of 12 years. His detailed account of judicial misconduct had led to a comprehensive review of every case he had presided over during his tenure, resulting in the overturning of over 300 convictions thus far. Police Chief Ronald Mercer received 18 years for his role in enabling and protecting Keller's activities while profiting from civil asset forfeitures. His cooperation had been minimal, but the evidence against him overwhelming. District Attorney Michael Harrington, who had cooperated fully and testified against all other defendants, received 5 years probation and permanent disbarment. His detailed explanation of how the corrupt system operated had proven invaluable to prosecutors. Officer Dawson, in recognition of his eventual cooperation, received 2 years in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of supervised release. His testimony against Keller had been crucial, particularly regarding the attempted murder of Agent Reynolds. As Imani left the courthouse, she found Agent Chen waiting for her beside an FBI vehicle. "Congratulations," he said as she approached. "Not many undercover operations end with this level of success." "It's not over," Imani replied, sliding into the passenger seat. "The sentencing is just one milestone. The real work continues in Westbrook." Chen nodded in agreement as he drove toward the FBI field office. "The restructuring is going well. New leadership in the police department, an independent review board for the court's community oversight. The blueprint could be implemented in other jurisdictions facing similar issues." "If the political will exists," Imani added pragmatically. The field office, Assistant Director Clark, was waiting to discuss Imani's next assignment. After the success in Westbrook, her expertise in undercover civil rights investigations was in high demand throughout the region. "Before we start," Clark said as they settled into the conference room, "someone's here to see you." The door opened, and Valencia entered, looking dramatically different from the worn-down inmate Imani had met in Westbrook County Jail. She was now employed as a community liaison for the federal re-entry program, helping former inmates transition back to productive lives. "Agent Reynolds," Valencia greeted her with a smile. "Or should I still call you Zara?" They embraced warmly before Valencia continued, "I'm here with some people who wanted to thank you in person." She opened the door wider, revealing Tyler Johnson and several other former inmates whose cases had been overturned through the federal investigation. Each had a story of lives rebuilt. Tyler had been readmitted to engineering school, with his scholarship reinstated. Others had secured employment, housing, or educational opportunities previously, denied them due to fabricated criminal records. "You didn't just catch some corrupt cops," Tyler told Imani earnestly. "You gave us our futures back." The impromptu reunion continued with updates from Westbrook. Jamal's community center had received federal funding to expand its programs. Diana had been appointed to a state-level commission examining police reform. Officer Rivera had been promoted to oversee jail reforms, ensuring humane treatment, regardless of race or economic status. After the visitors departed, Imani returned to her meeting with Clark, feeling renewed purpose in her work. The success in Westbrook had proven that systemic change was possible, though never easy. "Your next assignment," Clark explained, spreading files across the table. "Similar statistical anomalies, different jurisdiction. Are you ready?" Imani opened the first file, studying the pattern of discriminatory enforcement that had emerged in another small city. The work would be difficult, dangerous, and essential. "I'm ready," she confirmed. That evening, as a symbolic closure to the Westbrook chapter, Imani visited the Federal Detention Center, where Richard Keller was being processed before transfer to his permanent facility. She didn't request to see him. There was nothing left to say. Instead, she observed from the administrative area as Keller was led through intake, his expression vacant as he faced the reality of his new circumstances. In a twist of irony that wasn't lost on Imani, Keller passed several former Westbrook inmates who had been released after their convictions were overturned. They were there completing paperwork for restitution claims, free men watching their former persecutor beginning his own lengthy incarceration. Outside the detention center, Imani paused to appreciate the full-circle nature of the moment. The system Keller had corrupted had ultimately held him accountable. It wasn't perfect justice. Nothing could truly compensate the victims for years of harassment, false imprisonment, and damaged lives. But it was a meaningful step toward healing. Westbrook's deep wounds. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. "New case files ready when you are." With one last look at the detention center, Imani turned toward her vehicle. Another community needed her skills. Another corrupt system required exposure. The work of justice continued, one case at a time. As she drove away, Imani reflected on her journey from rookie agent to lead investigator. The Westbrook case had changed her, deepening her understanding of both injustice and resilience. She had witnessed the worst abuses of power and the most inspiring courage in standing against them. The road ahead would be challenging, but Imani Reynolds was ready. Justice delayed was not the same as justice denied not when someone was willing to fight for it, and fight she would for as long as necessary. Behind the badge reveals how systemic racism operates through corrupted institutions, where individual prejudice transforms into structural oppression when protected by authority. The story demonstrates how prejudice is not merely about attitudes, but about power to target, frame, and silence those who resist. It highlights the courage required to challenge entrenched systems, showing that change demands both internal, whistleblowers, and external pressure. Most importantly, this narrative emphasizes that justice is not inevitable, but requires persistent documentation, community solidarity, and institutional accountability. When marginalized communities partner with principled allies within the system, seemingly impenetrable walls of corruption can crumble. The path to justice is never straightforward. It involves setbacks, betrayals, and dangers, but persistent truth-telling ultimately exposes corruption to light. In confronting racism, silence is complicity, courage is contagious, and systems change when enough brave individuals refuse to accept injustice as normal. Have you ever witnessed or experienced racial discrimination from those in positions of authority? Comment below with a 1 if you believe police accountability needs major reform, or 2 if you think current oversight systems are sufficient. What small step could you take in your own community to challenge injustice and support those fighting against discrimination? Hit the like button if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment under the law, and subscribe for more stories that shine a light on difficult social truths. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey through Imani's fight for justice. Remember that in the face of systemic racism, your voice and actions matter more than you know.